Today we're going to talk a little bit about where your coffee beans come from, a little bit about farmers and how they get from all of the different countries to here in our shop. The coffee plant starts as a seedling. It's about that big, and it takes about 3 years after planting to grow into this big 6-foot bush that produces tons and tons and tons of coffee cherries. Now there are two types of coffee plants. One is the Robusta and one is Arabica. We primarily use Arabica here in this shop. Now the coffee cherry, if you were to split it in half, looks like this. A coffee cherry typically has 2 beans inside. So you have this beautiful red cherry, and then you have the fruit of the cherry and the 2 beans. Now during processing, the whole goal is to get the cherry off of the beans without damaging the beans themselves.
There's 2 main processing methods. One is a natural process and one is a washed. And the main difference between those is a natural process is allowing those fruits that are on the outside of the seed to impart some additional flavors, and probably most cases are going to leave a little bit of that fruit on so that when we roast it, it'll have a little bit of the acidity that comes from that fruit. The other process is more common, is a straight washed process where all of that gets washed off the outside, and then what's left is just your seed. And so the difference between your taste profiles is that your natural processes will get some of those funky little flavors that can come in that can be quite pleasant or not very pleasant at all. Whereas with the wash process, you get much more stable profile across, much easier to roast. But the basic flavor of the bean is still coming through from the country of origin, the type of varietal that the coffee is grown, whether it's a Bourbon or a Cultura or different types of Arabica coffees.
We prefer hand harvesting over machine harvesting because with hand harvesting, you know you're getting them at the correct development. So hand harvested, and then they go through that processing method. And once they've been processed and they are dried, they go to a bagging station. Sometimes these are on the farms, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they have to be shipped to a bagging station close by.
What happens with a lot of coffees that are mass produced is they sit in these bags or they sit in the containers for extended period of time. And if the country of origin is landlocked with a lot of heat, because these are grown mostly around the equator, the seeds can actually be damaged while they're sitting there in the port in those big containers, those big metal containers, at 120 to 140 degrees, and it may take weeks for that coffee to get out, and that coffee is just degraded. And so the transportation and the processing methods are critical to the end profile of that taste that you're going to be drinking. So this particular coffee is a micro lot grown on about 3 hectares, which is about 6 acres of farming. And in a small batch like that, they can spend a lot of time focusing on their production process, their fermentation, getting it dried appropriately so that it doesn't degrade when it's being shipped into the US.
So another reason that we are very careful about the coffees that we bring in is that within the coffee industry, it is used hugely is slave labor. Slave labor is a huge part of why so many coffees are very, very cheap, because they are not paying their workers. So that is part of why a lot of the coffees are more expensive when they're in the specialty coffee, because everyone's getting paid. This is a huge part of our business. It's why we go to SCA quite a bit, is so we can meet those farmers, so we can meet those green buyers and make sure there's nothing unethical going on within their coffee practices. The other reason that those coffees tend to be a little bit higher price point is so many of the farms we like to work with are taking extra measures to care for the land that they are growing their coffee beans on. This means that they're very careful with their water practices, with their waste. After they have removed all those coffee cherries, what happens to them? Just all of those little factors really start to make a big effect if they are not properly taken care of.
What we see with the coffee processing and transportation and different aspects of getting the coffee from the farm into the cup that you're going to be drinking, any one of those processes can cause the coffee to not taste as good. So you can have, whether it's climate, whether it's heat, whether it's storage, all of those things can affect the taste of the coffee that you're going to have. So it's important that at every step along that way that we have a good eye on what it is that you're getting into your particular cup of coffee. So from start to finish, when a coffee plant first is planted into the ground, all the way to the care of that plant to a full-grown bush, to processing the seed that it produces, to getting that through the fermentation process, transported into the country, all those things are important to the final cup that you're going to be drinking. Any one of those can degrade the taste of the coffee, and we try to keep a very close eye on all aspects of that, so that you have the best coffee that we can get into your taste buds.
Into your hands. I'm Sarah with Twin Beans Coffee Company.
And I'm Paul with Twin Beans Coffee.
Thank you for joining us today.